Welcome to The Uncanny Lens, where we are exploring self-concept reflections in pop culture and media. I'm your co-host, Jinx Kelly.
And I'm Minx.
And today we are going to be talking about the 1990 movie Home Alone, starring Macaulay Culkin, Catherine O'Hara, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, and John Hurd. We also see some familiar faces such as John Candy, Roberts Blossom, Larry Hankin, Kieran Culkin, and Cinta Moses. I do want to note that Macaulay Culkin was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy for his role in this movie because Macaulay is the fucking shit. This movie is currently streaming on Disney Plus. And you'll have the option to choose from 6 Home Alone movies in total if you would like to explore the Home Alone universe. But for the purposes of today's episode, we will only be speaking about Home Alone, the original. But before we get started with that, Minx, what's new in your media mindset this week?
Well, I just started listening to the audiobook by Duke of Sussex, Spare, which came out earlier in the year, like much earlier this year. And it is fascinating, I've got to say. And you know what it's bringing up for me is this understanding of you don't know what you don't know about someone, right? So and how much we judge based on the information that we don't know about people.
What I've read of the Prince Harry book so far, I would agree with that. And we're going to do a whole episode on Prince Harry and this book because it's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. How about you?
So what's really been coming up for me is as I've been really diving deep into this podcast episode, as well as the mini series, I guess you could say, that we're developing for our membership around our holiday media mindset, is really the way that the holidays are impacting me, which is the exact reason why we wanted to create our holiday media mindset mini series, right? And as I'm doing the work, I get to be my own case study again, because I am seeing what it's bringing up for me. And it's so conflicting because there's these warm, cozy feelings that are coming up, but then there's also these like scary memories and things that are associated with different feelings that are stored in my nervous system that are coming up. And so I'm so excited to get into this and to get into that, to keep creating the holiday media mindset miniseries, because it's just so much fun to really dig into this type of information that's stored in our body, that's stored in our nervous system, to access it in a different way, to be using the media that is just like subconsciously getting deep into our bodies with these feelings, right? And to be able to extract from that those things that can help us heal, those things that can help us move forward, those things that can help us embody, different versions of ourselves and be able to reach new heights in our life. So I'm just fascinated by this exploration into media and how we're using it to heal ourselves. And the more that we are creating and developing our business and our offers in the Ventureverse, like it's just so invigorating to me, and it's what makes me feel like I am on purpose and doing what I'm meant to be doing, that I'm passionate about, and it's just bursting out of me. It's amazing.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into Kevin McAllister. Are you ready for this?
I am. This is one of my favorite movies growing up, and it's a movie that I watch every single year, so I've probably seen this movie at least like 40 times, I'm sure.
I watch it every single year as well. And I couldn't even count the number of times that I've seen it.
A lot.
So, and it's usually just this one. I don't watch the sequel very often, and I've never
Me
seen
neither.
anything after the sequel. Like anything
Yeah,
after the original characters, I have not watched.
right.
So, if you have not seen Home Alone, we're going to give you a very
At
brief
this
summary.
point.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what to say. There are going to be spoilers. So, if you haven't seen it, maybe turn this off, go watch it and come back. It's like I said, it's on Disney Plus right now, so it's you can access it. But let's just give you a brief summary of the movie, okay? So, an 8-year-old troublemaker mistakenly left home alone must defend his home against a pair of burglars on Christmas Eve.
Yep,
Now,
that sums it up.
I do take issue with the term troublemaker because I don't
Mm,
agree. I saw some other people on IMDb describe him as arrogant and,
mm,
different words like that. And I'm like, he's 8. I mean, his uncle keeps calling him a little jerk. You know
yeah,
what I mean? I'm like, he's 8.
yeah.
So to me, that again, he's not the problem.
No, no,
The
no.
family is. His parents are. Like that's always
100%.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
problem. He's not getting
Definitely.
something met, and so maybe we say an 8-year-old who's being neglected, an 8-year-old latchkey
That's exactly
child,
what I
like
was thinking. Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what it should say.
he's seen as always being the problem, as always misbehaving, but it's a lot of it is like attention-seeking behavior, right? Because his parents are just like they've got 5 kids. He's the youngest of 5. And he's called les incompetents by his sister, and I just love that one. Like he's incapable of packing his own suitcase at the beginning of the movie, and he's very needy, but a lot of that is just like he needs attention from his family. Like he wants his mom's attention. So he does these things to act out, but it does like that's not who he is, right? It's just his behavior is such that he is asking for attention.
And that starts to develop the concept that he has of himself and
Hmm.
that he has of his family. Okay.
Right.
So this is where it's really, I think, tricky because Kevin wouldn't have thought these things about himself necessarily until everybody else was telling him this, right? So
Right.
they're telling him he's an idiot.
Les incompetents, like, yeah, just incompetent, right?
They're
Hmm.
saying that he is incapable or inadequate in some way. And it's repeated. It's repeated. And then when he goes to try to get help, his mom's like, I'm on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Like, leave me alone. And so, what I'm getting from this situation is that mom and dad are busy with their careers, and it's sort of been left up to the older kids to raise the younger kids. And the older kids didn't
Right.
really get they're not parents. They're not meant to
No,
be
no.
raising the younger kids. And so
No.
they're put in this situation where they can't provide for the younger child, and the parents aren't providing for the younger child, and so the child
In
starts
a
to
in a emotional way, right? We see that this is a family with great wealth and financial means, but yeah, providing in an emotional, supportive way.
Yes. So what is packing a suitcase? Is that emotional? Not to be getting into emotional baggage. Let's not confuse the two. But that's what is that? So it's not, a financial need obviously, but it's not necessarily an emotional need. Like it's a life skill. He needs to know how
Well, and
to
it's
pack a
something
suitcase.
nobody's ever showed him before because like it seems like people just do stuff for him because
Is the
he's
youngest.
never been modeled. Yeah, and it's never been modeled for him, right? So he just hasn't, or maybe it has been modeled, but he, in order to get attention, just is like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I want your help to do this because I actually just need somebody to pay attention to me and like hang out
Wow.
with me for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of all the different ways that that could go. And obviously, we can't get into the mind of Kevin McAllister, but it's very interesting to be curious. Back to that curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah,
be curious
exactly.
about what might be going on for him. And those are some possibilities. So
Yeah.
so we see Kevin as really feeling like he wants to belong and be a part of the family in a way that is meaningful, where he's not just a burden or somebody to be
Mm-hmm.
taken care of or somebody who's needy or can't do anything for himself, right?
Yeah.
And again, at 8 years old, I think that it's, he probably should know how to pack a suitcase at 8 years old. I mean, has he never gone to a sleepover or gone camping? You know what I mean? So it's that kind of,
Mm-hmm,
those kinds
mm-hmm.
of questions come up for me. So yeah, I guess he probably should know how to do that. Other than that, we don't really know much about him. Like, we don't see Kevin around any friends. We only see him around his family. So
Yeah.
those are the only two, branches of his concept of self that we really get to see,
Yeah. We see him alone
identified.
a lot, right? And then we
Yeah,
see him.
he is
Yeah.
home
Mm-hmm.
alone after all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. The whole the whole movie is about that.
Okay, so
Uh,
his family, let's talk about their self concept. So I don't want to get into each individual character. I just want to touch on the fact that as a whole, the family feels very chaotic to me. And there seems to
mm-hmm.
be this very fend for yourself type of vibe.
Completely.
Do you get anything else from the family? It seems, I guess the other thing I would note is it seems like the McAllisters tend to be I guess they're all McAllisters, aren't they? Sorry. The McAllisters who live in the house, right? Kevin McAllister's family, they seem to be the better off family, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that's
Or Uncle Frank at least seems to be a little bit like stingy, if
right.
not just, yeah, maybe they don't have the means. Exactly.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that is something else that's playing out as far as like the concept of the family and how that looks, is that, yeah, Uncle Frank is a little, uh you said stingy. What was the word I was going to say? Maybe like a penny pincher, or
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
in some way is not reflecting the abundance that we see the rest of the family that lives in that house
Mm-hmm.
reflecting,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And this is comes down to like when the pizza is being
Mm,
delivered. And yeah. One thing that stood out to me this time, back then, you could get more for your money, right? In the 90s. And just the cost, the cost of things was much lower.
right.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
interesting to think that you could order, what did they say, 10 pizzas at $12 each. I don't know, how much does a pizza cost now? I don't order pizza. How much does the pizza cost?
I mean, when I order pizza in San Francisco, California, it's at least $30 for
What?
to feed. Yeah, like for the delivery and everything.
For
Oh my God,
one
it's
fucking
insane.
pizza?
Like a large pizza, getting it delivered. Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow. Wow. That's so hard for me to
Yeah.
believe that the price of a
Hmm.
pizza has changed that much. Like,
Anyway,
no, I mean, it's important though, because this is part of like
yeah.
what we see reflected back to us in society. So maybe we can come
Hmm.
back to
Hmm.
that when we're in that kind of
Yeah.
segment. But wow, that's blowing my mind. But speaking of the pizza delivery, to get back to our characters and their self concepts here, Harry. So the pizza delivery is happening, and Harry's standing in their living room dressed full on
As
as
a
a police
cop.
officer,
Hmm.
impersonating a cop, right? And I just want to say that this guy has some self concept of steel. Whoo! To be able to put on that uniform and stand there and sell that to every single person in that house, and nobody questioned
Mm,
him at all. Nobody asked to see any identification or anything. And that just was so interesting to me, because he knew that he could embody that type of energy and con
yeah.
people. So I
Yeah.
think that Harry has a very interesting self concept, because he obviously is a crook, but thinks highly enough of himself and his abilities to be able to con and fool people in order
Yeah.
to rip them off. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
really, really interesting, the kind of juxtaposition I see within his self-concept. Yeah, I mean, his
Yeah.
mindset is just so interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so then we have Kate, the mother, and
Mm-hmm.
she seems to be very much just, I don't know if I was self-absorbed, I guess might be the word that I would say. She seems very
Mm.
into whatever she's doing. That's we don't see much
Yeah,
of her though in the beginning.
I think she does seem like she does feel chaotic and overwhelmed. That's more of what I get from her in that instant is like this overwhelm and uh hmm distraction.
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
she's, you know, because she's like trying to plan this freaking vacation and get all this stuff situated in her, you know, sphere. So that's, you see her on the phone, you see her, uh, you know, kind of discombobulated. Like, what did I forget? What did I, you know, and obviously it's her son, but it just feels like she's got her plate full. You know, she's a mom, probably works, has 5 kids that, you know, are kind of neglected, but you saw that a lot in that time of, you know, history in the 90s. That was kind
Yeah, the
of
latchkey kids.
like a
Exactly.
normal childhood, right?
Okay, so the reason that I chose the word self absorbed is because, yes, she's overwhelmed, but once again, she, like all the other adults are doing, passes off adult responsibilities onto one of the children.
Mm,
So
mhm, mhm.
they pass off all these responsibilities to the children to make sure that all the children are accounted for. And it's just not okay to do. It's not okay to be
Mm,
giving those types of responsibilities to children. So, I mean, she needed to give it to her husband or to Uncle Frank or to Uncle Frank's wife or someone else besides
mm,
the children. And
mhm,
so I think that that's what I really see is a parent who wasn't parenting. She was giving it off to the older children, whether it were her
mhm.
children or her nieces and nephews. Everybody kept giving their parental duties off to the older children. And so one of the things, and this is just at the beginning of the story, right? Obviously,
Right.
everybody transforms, but this is just where they are at the beginning of the story, in my opinion, for Kate. I'm very
Mhm.
judgmental. This is where my judgy parts come in. I'm very judgmental of parents because of
Mm,
all the research and everything that I've been doing about trauma over the majority of my adult life because it's
mm.
just not okay. It's just not okay.
Well, and that's really interesting because I feel like very much on the other end because I am a parent, and this is maybe the second or third time that I've seen this movie since becoming a parent, and I definitely had a different self-concept going into watching it this time around. And I will say that I had a lot more compassion for the parents and understanding that, you know, it's still like this could never happen today. At least for the mom, you know, you get the sense that she is delegating, but that was probably how she was raised too. You know, if
Yes.
you're in a big family like that, that I don't think that was abnormal for this family or the culture back then. I think that that was probably how she was raised and how her family was raised, and going back, you know, several generations. You know, you did have to rely on the older kids to actually like just survive, right? So, you know, this family is clearly going above and beyond survival mode at this point. But yeah, I don't think that that was like an abnormal way to raise kids in that generation.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And she just didn't know better, right? That she didn't have another example to parent, right?
I agree with you. It was normal at the
Yes.
time. And that's part of the reason that we have this podcast is to point out that what
Mm-hmm.
was normal is not, that's not okay. It's not okay for us to look at media and think that it's normal when it's fucking not. And when
Yeah.
there's nothing else but that we're taking in and we're not getting any of these other perspectives. And I will say that the internet
Mm-hmm.
and social media in general has allowed us to have more information at our fingertips at all moments, right? We can access
Yes.
information about trauma that we never were able to access before, right? I understand that all of that's different. And that's why we need to talk about these things, because that
Yeah.
was considered normal, and it's fucking not
Yeah.
okay. Like
Yeah.
it's not okay. I know it was normal, and it's still not okay, right? I
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
empathy for Kate, and it was still not okay. I
Yeah.
mean, thank goodness these are fictional characters that we're talking about, right? Because much more horrible things happen to real people in real life. But this is a way that we can explore these ideas without it having to be super personal for us, right? We
And
can,
super traumatic for us. Yeah.
exactly, we can be a
Mhm.
little bit removed from
Mhm.
that, and be able to explore it in a way that there's a little bubble in between us and the
Yeah.
trauma, and it gives us the
Mhm.
opportunity to go into our own inner worlds and see what's
Mm.
coming up and where we may need to give ourselves some extra love,
Yeah.
where we need to
Yeah.
snuggle up. But I do want to touch on a couple of more characters. Marv has this need to be famous, right? Because that's how he starts this wet bandits thing of always turn. So I want to talk about that aspect of his self concept.
Going
And
down in infamy.
right, right. He was,
Yeah.
it's so funny that he wanted to be famous in such a silly way, too, right? There's no violence involved. He just wants to leave the water run.
Yeah.
He's just
Yeah.
destruction. It's just destruction.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, destruction of wealth.
And attention grabbing, right? Like that's, I think, we see a similar quality in him that we do in Kevin. Like he's acting in a specific way to get attention.
Oh, obviously, all of these characters are reflections of each
Yeah.
other in one way or another.
Mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely, right?
exactly.
So I think that's part of the reason that Harry and Marv like kept after Kevin instead of just like
Yeah.
throwing the hands in the air and
Fuck
turning around
this.
with their tails. Right, exactly. And then so the last character I really want to bring up is Gus, which is John Candy's character. And the reason
Mm.
I want to bring him up is because we do see him for a short period of time, and we don't get to know too much about him, with the exception of him talking about the funeral parlor story with his
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, that all of his lines were improvised, which just makes it even more
That makes
brilliant.
sense. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And when you sit there and watch Catherine O'Hara's face, Kate, as she's responding to this supposedly improvised piece,
I'm sorry, you said you could help me?
it was
Stop talking about polka?
amazing. Particularly with the funeral parlor story. I mean, as
Mhm,
he
mhm.
starts telling the story, and the fact that she was able to keep a straight face and stay in character is just testament to what an amazing actress she is, and what an
Yeah.
amazing comedian John Candy was, because it was just if you look at it through that lens, just the
Mm.
improvisation that
Improvisation.
he was
Yeah.
doing was just absolutely brilliant, and I was
Yeah.
just so much respect for watching that with them. But as he's telling this story, I get the sense that he feels like he's kind of been a fuck up as a parent, right? Because he's talking
Mm.
about, I hope
Yes.
none of this other guy's kid writes a book about him, and this guy doesn't even know his kid's name, and like all of these things, right, about his fellow
Yeah.
bandmates. And
Yeah.
I just get the sense that he feels like shit about the kind of parent he's been, and that's why he's
Mm.
going out of his way to help Kate.
To help her. Yeah, that's beautiful. One other character that I want to look at as well is Old Man Marley, because he's somebody that Kevin ends up helping at the end. And we see him at the beginning of the story as this kind of feared, crazy, uh, you know, villain who
Mm.
dismembered his family and dissolved or mummified them in the
Yeah.
salt, or like something
Oh, can we
terrifying
talk
that
about that scene for a second?
yeah.
Because watching that, if I was like putting myself in Kevin's shoes, right? Like I'm an 8-year-old, right? And
Yeah.
I'm listening to my older cousin or someone tell me this story, I would absolutely fucking believe them. I would
Yeah. Oh my God,
absolutely believe them.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I know. So Kevin is like terrified of his next door neighbor after this. He sees him a couple times and just screams and runs away right before he's about to defend his home against these robbers. He runs into Old Man Marley at the church, and that's when they have this beautiful conversation and connection. And I feel like Kevin is able to offer some wisdom to this older man.
Okay, so that
And
feels to me like where there's a shift in self-concept. So maybe we should start getting into
yes.
shifts then.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a
Yeah.
good point.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that we do see Marley's self-concept shift when he's speaking with Kevin in the church. Now, we had
Mm-hmm.
seen him running into Kevin, right? Like they run into each other at the convenience store when Kevin's trying to buy a
Mm-hmm.
toothbrush. And there are some other times where he kind of sees Kevin. And so we know he kind of has his eye on Kevin. He's maybe sort of maybe knows something might be going on, right? Even though
Yeah.
he doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what. And so I think that when he approaches Kevin and then sits down to speak with him, that we start to see that shift. We see
Mm-hmm.
Kevin and what Kevin's concept is of Old Man Marley shift in that moment. And then we
Yes.
also see Old Man Marley's self-concept shift in that moment because somebody
Yeah.
welcomes him in.
Well, and it's really interesting if you look at it, the beginning of the movie, we see these two different characters in Harry, who is fooling everybody as a cop. So he's supposed to be this good guy, right? And then we see Marley as this villain who has dismembered and, killed his whole family. And that switches for Kevin at the end, right? So then
Yeah, that's a
he's like, oh
great
no,
point.
actually, that cop is not really a cop, and that man that lives next door is not really a scary murderer. But so that was a really interesting shift that happened as well. So he understands in this moment, as I think this is like an important lesson for kids to understand, like you can't judge a book by its cover, and that sometimes things are deceiving and they don't appear as they are, right? So,
Well, and we'll get into this later when we talk about reflections in culture, but
mhm,
Kevin never has a pleasant experience with somebody in a police uniform in this movie.
mhm.
Never.
Yeah,
But we'll get back
exactly.
to that. We'll get back to that. So let's talk a little bit about
Mhm,
Kevin and his self concept shift. And
mhm,
what I feel happens for Kevin is he has multiple shifts. He goes
mm,
from this shift into everything's fun. Like, I'm so powerful.
yeah.
I made my family disappear and I get to have freedom and live the life that I want to live without these people making me feel like a piece of shit all the time. Right.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm,
he gets into this like trauma situation, right? When
mm,
everybody realizes he's gone and there's cops pounding on his door and there's different things
mm,
starting to happen that are making him understand that he's alone and he may not have the skills and tools to navigate this in a way that he feels
mhm.
confident. And so we start to
Yeah,
see the trauma, him hiding under the bed, right? Those types of
yeah.
things. And then we see him eventually get to a space where he's kind of in between, right? He understands the
Mm,
seriousness of his situation. He understands that it's not all fun and games, but he's expressing this self care for himself, right? He's taking care of himself. He's doing what
yeah.
needs to be done to make his life pleasant and enjoyable while his family is away. He is, making himself his Christmas Eve dinner of mac and cheese. He goes out and
Mhm,
cuts down the tree so that he can decorate for the holidays for if his family does come back. You know what I mean? Like all of the things
mhm,
that he's doing is still taking care of himself, but he has to get there, right? He has to go through this evolution, and everybody really goes through an evolution. So, where do we see Kate's shift? I feel like Kate shifts immediately on the plane when she realizes they've forgotten
yeah.
Kevin, because then she starts repeating over and over again, I'm a terrible mother, I'm a bad parent.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. We see her in a panic state for pretty much the rest of the movie until she gets home, right?
Right. Yes. She stays in, well, and I mean, yes, it's panic, but her self-concept is in, I'm a terrible mother.
Yeah.
I am a
Mhm,
bad parent. How could this possibly happen? What kind of
mhm,
person am I? Right? She's in that space and she doesn't get out of
mhm,
that space until she's with Kevin again in their
mhm.
home at the end.
Yeah,
But yeah, she is going through this I'm a terrible person sort of thing. And it was a wake-up call.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, big time.
And then we see Gus, I feel, have a lot to do in helping her with that shift because he's talking about the funeral parlor story, right? So he's he's helping her with that self-concept shift at the
Yeah.
end, because she
Yeah.
really was stuck in I'm a bad parent, and there was nothing else that you could convince her of otherwise. She was willing
Yeah.
to sacrifice everything then to make up for being a bad parent. She separated from the
Mm-hmm.
rest of her family. She stayed in the airport to wait for standby. She,
Yeah.
was
Gave away everything,
trading all of
like her
her,
earrings.
yes,
Yeah.
to be able
Mm-hmm.
to get on different flights. And then she was riding in the back of a budget moving truck with a polka band to get back to her child. Like, she was willing to do
Mm-hmm.
anything. And that was so beautiful to see, that
Yeah.
she, even though she thought she was a bad parent at that moment, she was not giving into that. She didn't just give up and
Mm-hmm.
decide, oh, I'm a bad parent, I guess there's nothing I can do. I guess there's nothing I can
Yeah.
do, which I almost would say that's what her husband was doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
He was just like,
He
well, I
was
guess
like, oh,
I'll
it's
take
no
care of
big
the other
deal.
kids. I'll try to get the rest of us home later, right? But there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I must do everything. And I could relate to that, because that's the type of person I am. I'm
For
not a
sure.
parent, but
Yeah.
that's the type of person that I am.
Mm.
I will do anything for the people that I love. And so to see
Mm-hmm.
her feel like she was a bad person, but still be like, but that's not how this is going to end. I may feel like a bad parent right now, but I am going to make this right. And that was the thing
Yeah.
that I really loved about the shift in Kate's
Mm.
self-concept.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it was, you could see clearly that she loves her family, and maybe she's become distracted by a lot of other pieces moving around in her world, but she genuinely does love her kids.
Just to get back to Kevin for a moment, I want to say that when we are
Hmm.
watching his evolution, two of the scenes that stand out for me the most are his getting ready scene, when he does start his self-care, right? And that's
Yeah,
the very famous scene, but he's doing this like adult routine, right? Because he's
right.
the man of the house or whatever. But then there's this other part where he is going to buy his toothbrush that he needs, and he ends up inadvertently shoplifting. And he
Yeah.
goes from being so proud of himself, right? Because he was trying to make sure that he was getting the right toothbrush. And
Hmm.
it cracked me up how he was so confident with like being.
The questions he
Yes,
had,
and
and yeah.
the woman behind the counter was clearly annoyed and was like, "You got to be fucking kidding me with this kid, right?" Like, she was like, "What is this child asking me these questions for?" So he's so proud of himself, and then he goes to walking down the street and he says, "Like, I'm a criminal now." So he goes from being so proud of being the man of the house to being a common crook. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It was so funny,
yeah.
and that's where I feel like we see the reflections kind of come back to him with Harv and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
with Merv and
Marv.
Harry. I
Yeah.
combined their
Yeah.
names there, Harv. I guess that's what we could call him, like they call it
Harry and
Binifer.
Marv.
Yeah, it's like Harv.
Oh boy. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He becomes a criminal. And
Wait,
then
what's it
he
going to be
is
for me and Zac Efron? Will it be Zinks? Is that what it's going to be? Zinks?
yes,
Hmm.
yes, it will.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just
No,
my
that's
imagination went
hilarious.
off for a moment. But let's come
Oh
back
my
to
God,
Harv.
you
What
crack
were
me
you
up.
saying?
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, and in that moment, he is nearly run over by these
The
criminals,
actual
right? So
criminals,
he's just
right?
made, yeah, so he's just made this connection. Oh my God, I'm a common crook.
Oh,
And then
wow.
here they are. They almost, yeah, ran him
Oh,
over.
I love that you made that connection. That's fucking
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. And then, you know, when when he is like taking care of himself, he does get to this point where at first he's like, "Oh my God, I can eat as much junk food as I want because my family's gone and I can watch whatever I want to. I'm going to watch this scary movie nobody ever lets me watch. I'm going to jump on the bed. I'm going to do all these things that I'm always told not to." And he doesn't end up getting any gratification out of that, right? It's just in the past, those things have gotten him attention, but everybody is gone now. So he's not getting any attention from those behaviors. And he recognizes, oh shit, okay, well, nobody's coming back for me. I am hungry. Ice
Mm.
cream probably doesn't feel very good in my body right now. I've got to go like eat real food. And so then he shifts into this space of it's like he's trying on being a grown up, right? So he goes in and he's modeling what he's seen grown-ups do. And it's really cute because he's an adorable little 8-year-old and you just see him trying to act like an adult. And that's part of the comedy of this movie and what Macaulay Culkin gets so right. I think he does that so well here. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's
Mm.
still like it's a cult classic. It's something that people go back to year after year after year to watch.
Okay.
Um,
So I actually want to
but
speak to
yeah,
that because
yeah,
what I see happening in addition to what we're seeing that the movie's presenting, right? This cute kid, what all
mm-hmm,
the things that you just mentioned. The other thing that I see happening is Kevin starting to parent himself in a way that he
yes,
hasn't been getting from his own
mm,
parents. So yes, he is acting like a
mm-hmm,
grown-up in a sense, but it's really to be parenting himself because he's not getting it from his
yeah,
parents.
yeah. It's
And
soothing a part that's been neglected.
right. And
Mm-hmm,
so and it's one of the things that we're encouraged to do as we're healing from the trauma of being neglected
yeah,
or having an abusive
mm-hmm,
childhood or something like that is to learn how to
mm-hmm,
parent ourselves. Okay, so I don't want to make too many assumptions here, but it's interesting you said that Macaulay Culkin was so good at doing those particular adult type of routines, and we're talking about him learning how to parent himself
mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
the role of Kevin McAllister, because what we sort of understand about what we've heard about Macaulay's home life is that he was not getting his needs met in his real life family. And
mm-hmm.
so I think it's interesting that he was able to act in this role so well that he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor because it
Yeah,
could be reflecting what was actually going on in his home
in
life.
his real life,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I just wanted
Mm-hmm.
to make that point. Again, I don't want to make a lot of
Mm,
assumptions about what was actually going on behind closed doors because we don't know that. Only the Culkin family knows that. But I want to talk about some of the reflections in culture, right? So, not just Macaulay and what he was going through in his real life there, but another thing that brings up, which is somebody not being able to get the help that they need from the system. That is something that we saw reflected in this movie with Kate trying to get the help that she needs from the system. We saw her now it was made for comedy. Don't get me wrong. I
yeah,
understand that
yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah.
supposed to be funny. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here. What I'm just saying is we need to be looking at these things and how we're seeing things reflected back to us. It's okay to laugh at
Yeah.
them, but we also need to understand that it's not okay, right? It's not okay that she is in an urgent situation and she cannot get anybody to help her or take her seriously. They keep transferring her
Mm-hmm.
calls when she calls the police department in her neighborhood. We see her
Mm-hmm.
talking to, Officer Balzac, which I think is a hilarious. I don't know if that was meant
Eating
to
his
be a joke,
donut.
but it cracks me up that his name is Ballsack,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And they keep referring to her as hyper. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
no, she's not hyper. She's a terrified parent
Afraid.
who doesn't
Yeah.
know what is
Mm-hmm.
happening to her 8-year-old child who is left at home
Yeah.
alone, who she knows, based on everybody's perception of him, that he is incapable of taking care of himself, right? That's all we heard about
Mm-hmm.
Kevin.
Yeah.
And they just
Yeah.
disregard the
Yeah.
urgency of the situation over and over
Right.
again.
Well, and you see a lot in this movie and just, in I feel like this is the bureaucratic red tape that we see a lot just in our society. And you know what? It really is designed to keep people at bay so that change can't really happen quickly or easily, right? And it is a tool of our systems to keep us kind of submissive, you know? And you see this really playing out in this movie.
Well, in addition, I
Um,
feel that it's not just about keeping us submissive in that way, but also it's very clear that it's not the people who are important, it's property. I
yeah.
mean, we just see the cops scare Kevin over and over again throughout
Mm,
his time that he's alone. He never once goes to somebody in uniform for help. The only thing
Well, and
he
he also
does.
might be afraid after the toothbrush situation that they're going to lock him up.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
he never, even in the beginning, he doesn't call the police.
Mm-hmm.
When he's at home and his mom gets the police to finally go over there, what do? They pound on the door, right? It scares the
Mm-hmm.
shit out of him. He goes and hides. And then the cop's an asshole about it and says, "Tell them to count their
Yeah.
kids again," or something like that. Like there was
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
no compassion. They don't show up to do anything until Kevin calls 911, which is the only time he calls 911 or asks for help.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't even do it to say, "Somebody come help me." He gives the neighbor's address and has them go to the neighbor's
Yeah.
house so that he, once again, does not have to be
Interact.
interacting with the police.
He's constantly been being called like you're like misbehaving, right? You're a
Right,
naughty kid,
absolutely. That
right?
was already part of his
And he
self-concept,
reflects
yeah.
that. Yeah. And then when he is talking to Santa at the end, he's,
The one person he goes to for help is Santa. That's how much, that's how much he trusts the system as an 8-year-old child. I
Yeah.
fucking love it. That the
Mm-hmm.
person he goes to
Yeah.
is Santa. And Santa's the one who actually
Mm-hmm.
helps him and gives him the encouragement that he needs, right? Besides old man Marley, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where he gets his
Mm-hmm.
confidence again. That's where he gets, it's
Yeah.
just actually really beautiful that it's the magic. It's the
Mm.
magic within the
Yeah.
world and the magic within himself and the magic within his connection with old man Marley that keeps Kevin going, that keeps him
Yeah.
evolving in his self-concept and allows
Yeah.
him this space to be the best version of himself as his little 8-year-old
Yeah.
self protecting his home, you know?
Mm.
And then the
Yeah.
last thing, aside from the system with law enforcement, I do want to say that Kate also really just cannot get any help from the airline. They do little to
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
to help her in an emergency situation. I just wish they would
Yeah.
have done more. I wish they would have done
Yeah.
more. But
Yeah.
that's just, these are the types of things that upset me in our society.
Mm.
And so that's the
Yeah.
reason that they're things that I notice in this movie. That's the reason that they bother me. This is going to be different for
Mm.
everybody else, right? We all have different things that this movie or these different types of media are
Brings up.
reflecting to us.
Yeah.
What is it bringing up that sucks, that feels gross inside of
Yeah.
us? For me, this is one of the things that feels gross. I think it's gross
Mm.
that it just always seems to come to the bottom line of property or money and not people.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
Well, on that holiday note, I think that's a really good segue for why we decided to develop our holiday media mindset miniseries. This is going to be a part of our developing membership. And the way that it's going to look is that you are going to have 5 modules that you will complete that will help you get in touch with your holiday media habits and help you curate what you would like your holiday media playlists and watch lists to look like, and then to help you have some sort of evolution with where you have been and where you want to go in the future. What do you want to create for your holidays in the future, and how you're going to use the media that you explore in this mini series to develop that for yourself. And then that's going to lead into our media mindset makeover group coaching that will start in early 2024. So we recommend signing up for this holiday mini series if you want to get a taste of what the media mindset makeover group coaching is going to look like, because this will be a appetizer for the entree that is coming to you in 2024.
I'm excited. Yeah, so we're encouraging you this week to design or craft a holiday ornament or decoration that represents you protecting your home and welcoming in your desires for the holidays.
Yeah, we want you to really channel your inner Kevin McAllister. And
Yes.
when you're designing or creating this amazing holiday decoration, think about what Kevin was doing for himself as he was preparing for his family to come home,
Mm.
even if he didn't know if that was going to happen, right? He has no idea where his family's been this whole time. I mean,
He doesn't even think they went to France
yeah, as
because
far
the
as he
cars
knows,
weren't, yeah,
he
they just
magically,
disappeared.
yeah, they magically just went away and they will magically
Yeah.
manifest again somehow. He believes that. So channel that, because that's what it takes
Mm.
to believe the next thing is going to happen for you. Channel that is going to
Yeah.
happen for
That
you
magic.
as
Yeah.
the magic. Exactly. Get into that.
And that childhood, like
Mm,
really believing in magic as a kid, like that was just such a beautiful thing. And I don't know,
yeah.
maybe bring that into the process as well.
Right? Put
Hmm.
out some milk and cookies. I mean, we see Kevin bring out his cookies and milk for Santa, and
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
brought out carrots for the reindeer. So just tap into all of that magic as you're creating this, and just remember what Kevin was doing. He was protecting his home and he was making it inviting for
Mm.
when his family manifested back
Mm.
magically
Yeah.
in time for the
Just
holiday.
appeared again. Yeah.
Oh, and I love it too because he's
Mm.
like, "Oh, I know it's going to happen," and he was so excited it was going to happen on
He
Christmas
really
Day, and he
believed.
he woke
Yeah.
up and he ran
Hmm.
downstairs and they weren't there, and he turned around and he was like, "Oh, I guess they're not here." He was just looking at the reality that was in front of him. He wasn't thinking of
Mm.
all the magic that was still out there in the moment. And literally, as soon as he closed the
Yeah.
door, his mom pulled up. You know what I mean? So it's just like
Hmm.
so
Yeah. That
cool.
was so
It was such a
beautiful.
cool way that they did that because it's
Mm.
just I think it's just magical in how it feels like manifestation works. And that's exactly it. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
fun things about a lot of the movies that we choose. They're really good examples of this.
Yeah.
So,
I kind of thought about maybe like flipping the script on that first opening summary that you gave about an 8-year-old troublemaker mistakenly left at home, must defend his home against a pair of
mm.
burglars on Christmas Eve. How about we say like an 8-year-old kind of neglected child is left home alone and learns how to become the parent and caregiver for himself that he hasn't had and protect his home
Oh
on Christmas
my
Eve?
goodness. At the same time that he is also creating relationships within his community.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And making those connections for other people because you do see Marley at the end reconnect with his family as well. So Kevin's magic has spread, right?
Yeah, because he has those ventral
Mm.
vagal vibes and he's spreading them out into the
Yeah.
world. And it's all because he got in touch with that within himself, right? And then he was able
Exactly.
to, who
Mm.
knew Home Alone was such a beautiful story in addition to
So
being so
deep.
fun, right? It is so deep.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
so deep.
Yeah.
We love you,
Aw.
Kevin McAllister. We love you, Macaulay Culkin.
Yes.
And thank you so much to you, Macaulay Culkin, for what you had to go through to bring us this movie that brings so much
Mm.
joy and delight to hearts all over the planet every
Mm.
single year. Thank you. Minx, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me today. And
Same. It was so fun.
it was so fun to revisit this from our uncanny lens. And if you enjoyed this episode, we definitely would love it if you would follow, subscribe, rate, like, review, share, do all of the things, and stay connected with us because we have lots more in store. If you are listening on Spotify, we invite you to interact with our polls and questions. Until next time, keep improving your self-concept and revel on.
Bye, everyone.